Welcome back to this series on recovery from child sexual abuse with a focus on abuse occurring within the family of origin. I'm Rebecca Coffey, and I'm thrilled to welcome today Dr. Candice Reynolds, who has extensive experience in higher education. Today, we're going to be focusing on education, the importance of relationships, and we might even tap into a little bit of storytelling. But our three main areas that we will cover. The first is the unique crossroads that many survivors face between the ages of 18 and 25. The role of educational systems as a support network and a lifeline to survivors. And third, how college and university settings can provide community support as well as access to psychological treatment for survivors, often for the first time. So a quick disclaimer. So as Candice and I share tonight, we're sharing our own thoughts, our own opinions. And this video is just for informational purposes only. So it is not meant to be a substitute for medical or psychological treatment. And if you are in need of that, please do seek that out. Awesome. So before I formally introduce Candice, I always like to do just a little grounding and meditation so we can all come into our bodies as listeners and for Candice and I as the speakers so that we can speak from the heart. Okay. So go ahead and just find a comfortable seat and start to deepen your breath and maybe closing the eyes or find a drishti or a focal point. Just let your gaze fall upon and start to relax all the muscles in the face. And I'm going to lead us through a pranayama, a breath exercise. It's called Nadi Shodhana, alternate nostril breathing, and it balances the right and the left hemispheres of the brain. And it's a really nice breathing exercise to do right before bed. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to feel for your dominant hand. And you can open your eyes for a moment if you want just for this. So I'm going to take my peace fingers and you can put them on your third eye center if you like. And then you can use a thumb to block one nostril and the ring finger to block another. I don't like to put my fingers here. Some people do. So I'm just going to use my thumb and my finger to block my nostril. Okay, so you can bring your hands down to your knees again and maybe close the eyes and have just a soft gaze. So we're going to inhale nice and slowly, filling the belly. Let the collarbones rise. Stay lifted through your spine as you exhale slowly. And fully empty the belly of breath. And then inhale nice and slow, fill your back ribs. Let them puff out. And exhale, slowly soften the shoulders, relax the face and the jaw. Good. Okay, take that another round. Inhale nice and deep. And exhale completely. Okay, we'll block the right nostril. Inhale left. Blocking left, exhale right. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. Inhale left. Close left, exhale right. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. Inhale left. Close left, exhale right. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. And then release your hand to your thigh or lap. And return to your 3-part breath, filling belly, chest, let collarbones rise, and exhaling slowly. And just notice the effects of your Nadi Shodhana. And then taking one hand right onto your heart and the next on top of that. And just notice how it feels to have your hands connecting to your body, right over your heart center. We just set the intention tonight that what is shared will be of use, that those listening, especially survivors, will feel known, will feel seen, will feel less alone, and that there will be a great deal of hope. And so it is. And we'll release our hands and gently open our eyes, let the light fill, returning to this space. Okay, so I'm going to officially introduce Candice and give you a little bit of her bio and background. So Candice Reynolds is currently the Director of University Foundations and the Professor of Psychological Services at Boise State University. She has retired from her former career at Portland State University in Portland, Oregon. That's where I met her, and she worked for 34 years there. At this university, she was the Assistant Director of Counseling and Psychological Services, Interim Affirmative Action Director, Tenured Faculty Member of University Studies, Director of Mentor Programs within University Studies, and the Director of Teaching and Learning in the Center for Academic Excellence, among other roles and accomplishments. Far too many to mention.
You're somewhere for 34 years and you get bored easily, you take on different jobs.
Yes. I like looking at your resume. I just couldn't fit them all in. So, but I want to point out that she is also passionate about teaching and learning. And she believes that learning is social and that relationships are a key to learning, which I love. She also follows the maxim, once a psychologist, always a psychologist. And from that background, she believes that our individual stories are important and that they teach us and lead us to new discoveries. And I also noted, Candice, that on your website, you gave a shout out to your grandmother. and I find my grandmothers were so important to me. So I love that that was in there. So if you've been following this series for a while, you know that I am an incest survivor myself and that I share a piece of my journey in each video. And I like to pull in speakers who are not only knowledgeable, but those who were with me along my own path and journey. And so I'm going to talk now about how my life intersected with Candice, and then I'll have her bring her voice into the conversation. So I was about 21 years old when I met Candice. I had already been to the University of Connecticut for 2 years, and I took a little bit of a break from college to go on a spiritual journey. And I moved across the country from Connecticut to Seattle, and this spiritual journey of me just stopping my life was really, really important for me. And I knew that there was a root to some of the things that were really troubling me. And I just wanted to pause and have time to meditate and go within and just to really ask the universe or God, like, what is this? What is my root? Please show me. And it was during that time, I was away from home, and I also was financially independent from my family. I worked 3 jobs to try and just be able to stand on my own. And it was during that time that I really came to terms with the fact that I was an incest survivor. I had memories from my childhood of abuse that I never forgot, but they were silenced when I was 13 and came out with them, and I was told that they were not abuse. So I really did not fully understand the gravity of what I had lived through. And then also during this time, at the age of 20, other memories started to come. And so, I was abused between my ages of 0 and 5. I had 5 abusers, and 4 of them were in my family. So it was a lot to contend with. And I want to point out that, before this point in my life, I felt like at that time my life was a walnut. And as I remembered and really it sunk in, wow, I'm an incest survivor, it felt like a hammer coming down on this walnut and really shattering what I thought my life was. And, I thought my family was a safe home, and it was the place that I wasn't safe. So I was very, very vulnerable at this age. As I came out with my memories, I was partially believed by my family, partially not believed. And so I had to step away from my family. So that, suddenly I was this, young person who had been financially taken care of. I didn't have that anymore. I didn't have family supports. And, education had always been sort of a lifeline for me. So it was at this time that I went back to school, and I was finishing my 4-year degree in English. And that is where I met Candice, and in particular, a program that she had created and was incredibly supportive to me at that time. So Candice, I want to start off, and I want to ask you, can you talk about this peer mentor program that you created? And in particular, what were the benefits for the mentors, and what was the mentor going to give to the school? How did you set this up?
Okay. So this was part of our general education program at Portland State University. And it was really based on research about what made general education programs successful. And one of those conditions is that there were faculty and student relationships that were able to happen, and that was a priority, but also that there were student to student relationships that needed to be a priority. And so the General Education Committee at the time sort of made a decision that, we should capitalize on those two things. So in setting up the program, it really became one where for students in their first year, they were going to have lots of contact with faculty, but they were also going to have contact with other students that were just a little bit ahead of them in their academic journey. And, partly of the idea of that was that they could be models for students that might be struggling and be able to say, I struggled too. And here are some tools that I have learned. And, this learning stuff's kind of confusing, and we can do it together. That learning doesn't have to happen, with you and a book and a test. That learning happens in discussion and in relationship with others, and that really learning has to happen in context, right? So you have to be able to take what it is that you're learning and apply it to what you already know, for you to be able to use that information and the skills that you're gaining in the future. So the program was really built on those premises, and created for the students that were taking this freshman course. But the peer mentors were actually had lots of responsibility, and I think some people really felt like it was a crazy amount of responsibility, but I didn't. And I'm really glad that other people didn't think that either, so we got to do it. And because I really do believe that these students were just a little bit ahead, and they had lots of knowledge, and they had knowledge and skills that I did not have and faculty did not have. And so that faculty-student interaction that was happening, they were responsible for that. But the student-to-student interaction, the students needed to be responsible for that. Did I answer your question?
Yes, well,
Do you have follow-up questions?
yeah, follow-up questions for sure. So, I mean, later in life, when I became a psychotherapist myself, and I looked back on this time in my life, I didn't know this about you at the time. Maybe I briefly did, but it didn't sink in. It became very clear to me that you had a psych background because of the way you set this up. And let me just tell you, Candice, all the different ways that your program really met me. I was in it for 3 years. I was a peer mentor, and then I was a graduate mentor when I did my graduate degree in education. And, for one, I came from a family where, my 4-year degree was going to be paid for, but then I had to step away from my family, and I needed, at the time I was working at like the electric company, and they were paying 80% of my tuition, but a peer, she goes by her Korean name now, but Beth, you remember Beth?
Of course.
She was my best friend, and she was the one who grabbed me by the hand and said, "You have to do this." And it paid for my tuition. And what that did for me was it enabled me to be involved in my campus and to have that community. And, Candice, when you retired from PSU, look at all the people that came back and said, were part of that program and said, "You made a difference in my life." I have, Beth was one of my longtime friends, and then also Tom Becker, you probably remember. So these people I'm still friends with to this day. And it was so important that you connected us to one another, because the different peers said, "Oh, you need this, I'll help you find that on campus." It was Beth who helped me start, a dance therapy group on campus, and I had never gone to therapy. I had my own spirituality, and that really helped me, but I had never been to counseling. And I will tell you, it was on the PSU campus. I was terrified to go. And it was the first place I ever went to therapy. And I have been in therapy once a week, ever since then. It's part of my self-care. And I remember walking out of the counseling office and feeling like, oh my God, someone had given me names for what I had lived through, and it was a real thing. And I felt, before I had kind of felt crazy, and now I felt not crazy, and it was peers that really gave me the courage to go do these things, and also I do want to mention here that, for survivors, and it might not be someone who is sexually abused in the home. It can be, a home that has like undiagnosed mental illness or addiction, or, a lot of kids coming into the college setting are coming from families that have woundings, right? So, just as you could pick a dating partner who feels familiar to your family, you could also pick a tribe or a community that has elements of dysfunction that feel familiar. And I remember joining, your peer mentor program, and in it, you provided us with supervision. You gave us tools like, how do you relate to people in a healthy way, like conflict resolution, like all of these life skills were built in for us. And I ate them up. I was like, this is amazing. And I want to talk about the relational piece. I had already read a million self-help books, but I always say, like, if you are wounded in relationship, you have to be healed in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So can I come back to you, Candice, and can you just talk a little bit about why you feel it's so important for people to be in relationship, whether they're doing it as an act of learning in life, or if they're doing it as an act of healing?
Well, one, it's just a fact that learning is social. I mean, it's just a given. I mean, we don't learn anything, without being able, again, to relate it to something we know before and carry it forward, or to practice it, have someone show us how to do it. So to me, it's just a fact. But I think also learning and healing in a social context is really important for lots of different reasons. I mean, one, I think we are all in various stages of our own development. And it gives you what you got in some ways, which is to say, I'm not crazy. Other people are dealing with these issues. I can see they're a little step ahead of me. So there's hope for me. And I think it's also really affirming to be able to support others and feel some mastery over some, we had mentors that were really good at APA or MLA, right? And other mentors were going crazy. I'll never be able to learn that. And to be able to ask for help and to be able to give that help. That may be a silly example, but I think it's one, you can feel some mastery and feel some pride in your work, which motivates you to do better yourself. So that kind of connection, I think, is super important. And I think, learning in community also allows us to make mistakes, especially if it's in a trusting community, where we can make mistakes and others can prod us in the right direction, back in the right direction. Or let us make mistakes for a while and learn on our own, but know that there's other people around to be helpful.
Yeah, I loved that you pulled in the importance of service, to be giving while you're also receiving. And you know, whenever I work with clients now, I really believe in self-determination and giving people a sense of autonomy and dignity. And that was already put into your program as well. Like, I was just a junior in college, but I was leading others, and it gave me a sense of purpose. And for someone who was so fragmented like me, I was dealing with a lot of grief. I had so many other things on my plate, but to get up in the morning and to feel like I was going to make a difference in the world. And I know from the conversations that I had with peers, that's a lot of what we did, is we talked about how we were going to change the world and make it a better place, and that everyone had a particular
And you all have.
yeah, yeah, that everyone had a different gift, and that sense of purpose was, so hopeful to so many of us, and is so important for kids, that model. I've worked in high schools for years in the public school setting, and when there are programs where kids are set up to lead one another, it's a win-win for everyone, and rather than just, we look at the model of education of just like sort of kids being a sponge and you have one person talking, right? Like, yeah, it changing it up and giving people the responsibility for their own learning and for their own lives is so key. So I love that your program did that.
Great. And I think the other part about relationships being key is just a reminder that we're people as well as instructors and students, and that we relate to each other as people. And that if I can, as an instructor, if I can be for you here as an instructor, there may be other ways that I can be there for you.
Yeah.
And there's ways that you can be there for me as a student. You have gifts. I always say I learn more from my students than I do from my colleagues. And it's usually true.
And that's kind of not always how education works, right? So in the educational systems, I feel self-care is so lacking, especially for staff, and and it's not something we necessarily model for kids and young people. A lot of times we sacrifice ourselves and our own lives. And I think that I would love for that to change some, for there to be more self-care. I think that's really important. Is there anything that you want to share around how you see that in your arena that you're currently in?
In terms of self-care or relationships or
Yeah, in terms of
of,
self-care for staff and
yeah. One, as much as I can, I try to, work on policies that reward people for the work that they're doing. So not asking people to participate in extra projects without paying them, feeding them when I can, creating community so that it's not just about the task at hand, but sharing of ourselves a little bit, even if it's just a stupid icebreaker. Stupid. But taking time to do that. And really I encourage people to talk about self-care and I share about my own self-care.
beautiful. I love that. It's so essential. I think in it as in an educational role and especially in a therapeutic role, that role of self-care.
Mm.
So, coming back to the survivor, and to especially those abused within the home. In an earlier video, I speak with another clinician who works with teens, and we talked some about, when young people will disclose or when young people will, start to get help for and to seek out help for what they've lived through. And we shared that, whether it's unconscious or conscious, that a lot of survivors will not start that process until they leave the home. And part of that is due to the fact that most survivors know that if they come out, that they will be removed from the home. And I think about that in my own life. I think for me, that might have been unconscious, but, so the transition between, the years of 18 to 25, that's when a lot of young people are leaving the home and, and often for them, that's leaving an abusive system. Another factor will be being able to stand on your own financially and not being financially dependent upon people that either abused you or, facilitated or knew that you were being abused, didn't believe you, all of those pieces. And so this is an age where many young people will step away from their family and those supports, either for a period of time or forever. And, as a survivor, I think that when someone from the outside looks at what is hard for a survivor, a lot of times I feel that if you're not a survivor, you think, oh, it was, if the abuse is no longer going on, you're good. If you got out of the situation, you're good. Now life can start and you can be much better. But there are so many complexities to the journey of the survivor, especially the incest survivor, that does not, a lot of times we don't see the complexity. And so I wanted to, in this video, focus on what it means to be estranged from your family and the challenges of that. And I'm going to mention a book called Educated by Tara Westover. It's a memoir that she wrote, and she grew up in a family where there was undiagnosed, untreated mental illness, and she did not have access to education. And it was through her own means of educating herself and then going away to college that she pulled herself out of a very dysfunctional family system. And I really related to so much that she wrote and saw myself in a lot of it. And one area that I feel like she does an excellent job of is talking about her love for her family and also the need to step away from it. And so I just want to read two quotes from her. And she says, "You can love someone and still choose to say goodbye to them." And the next quote is, "You can miss a person every day and still be glad that they are no longer in your life." So another piece of my story that I want to bring in here. So during my ages of like 21 to 23, which is when I was, in college at this time, I was still recovering memories. And through these memories, I did not know that these people that I loved had abused me. And for me, the only way I could process it was for some of these individuals to just die. I couldn't think that this person that I loved and that I thought cared about me, and then, at a very young age also abused me. I couldn't put the two together. So, and especially for one abuser in particular, it was like she just died. So, at that time, I was going through the grief of a very important person in my life. And it was unacknowledged grief. I didn't have a funeral. I didn't have a grave site to go to. I wasn't telling people about this other than like my therapist. I didn't have meals to come and support me. And one of the reasons why I'm doing this series is because there are so many aspects of the survivor that are not talked about and can feel very, very lonely. And so, as you know, Candice, anyone who has unacknowledged grief in their life, it's even more difficult to process. And just to give another example of unacknowledged grief, it might be like someone who has a miscarriage, and people in society think, oh, that's not a big deal, it's not a big loss, and it makes the processing of that grief so much more difficult because there isn't an acknowledgement of it. So I bring these topics in to talk about, this time period for many survivors, 18 to 25, where there can be a lot going on that people don't know about. Loss of family in various ways, grief, coming to terms with abuse. There can be like, panic from PTSD. So as I bring that in, Candice, how do you think, someone going through that can best be supported, like at any point in life or maybe on a college setting?
Mhm. Well, college years are difficult for I think most young people. And you're right, I think most bring hidden things. And it's a time of intense psychological development and identity development. You're really trying to figure out who you are, where you're going, what's important to you. And probably the thing, I mean, we've already been talking about it. I think it's community. And finding a place where they can explore their identity and they can explore different ways to connect with people. It's really a moment, it's really a time of trying out new things. And I think for a survivor, it's really sort of trying out, what does it mean to not be in my family or is connected to my family? What does it mean for me to be a person outside of my family, to have my own identity and to make decisions for myself? And I think a college setting, not just in that age, is really, it's so cool because, like Tara Westover in her book, going to college allowed her to understand herself while she understood that kind of academics and the world around her. And so, when young people go to college who are struggling with all of these identity issues, I think it's a perfect sort of setting for some synergy. Which happens everywhere, right? It happens, by being away from a community that you've been grown up with, not just your family often, and figuring out how Portland, Oregon, a city, is different from Salem, Oregon, which is a smaller community, and who you are in all these different spaces.
I love that. Thank you. So I want to come back now to storytelling and stories. one thing that really helped me at that time, I was an English major and I had so many writing classes. I had like playwriting and screenwriting and writing through illness. And my poor professors, I wrote and wrote and processed and wrote and processed during that time. And, as a psychologist that you are, you share like people's stories are significant and they're important and they help us and they heal us. So what can you share about storytelling and the importance of writing and stories that you can offer, Candice?
Well, um, I, I, to me, I don't know that I'd call myself necessarily a narrative therapist, but to some degree, I think that we all have our own stories and that we need to listen to our stories to really understand ourselves. But most importantly, we need to understand our former stories to create new stories, and that we have agency to create those new stories. And you were talking about my grandmother, and so I probably get more of this from my grandmother than from anyone else. And she would always ask me, when something bad happened to me or I was excited about something, she would ask me the question, so tell me how the story is going to end. What are you going to do about this, little girl? And that message has carried me forward. That I needed to understand my story and I needed to tell it and have her listen, but she was also willing to listen to me trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do based on what had happened.
Wow, so inspiring. So Candice, how did you get into, like, why did you study psychology and why is education so important to you?
Uh, I got into psychology probably the way all people get into psychology, to understand myself and my family, and to try to make sense of my own experience. And so, I grew up in, a lower SES background, and experienced a lot of different traumatic situations that is related really more to poverty than to anything else, but a little chaotic. So, college was really an important place for me to sort of see the world in a different way and see a place where I could create a new story. Um, and I always have liked people and being with people and understanding people. So psychology, I had no idea. No one in my family had ever gone to college. So I really didn't, I started out wanting to be a teacher because that's what I knew. And I decided, no, I want to be a journalist because I was reading, newspapers a lot while I was in college. And, then it was like, oh, there's such a thing as psychologist and there's such a field as psychology. So I went into that. Um, I think I moved into education as time went on because I really felt like I wanted to have a bigger impact on people. And that while individual therapy is really, really important, I felt like my gift could be better used in a broader kind of audience. And there's, this age you're talking about, that 18 to 25 age, is incredibly inspiring. That, you read Tara Westover's work and in Educated, and you think, how can anybody come out of that situation? And you realize part of it is that everybody can come out of it, probably. If they have the community and the support, and there's just a lot of hope. So for me, education really became my focus because it helped me see hope in the world and contribute to having other people have hope.
Beautiful. I also loved that Portland State was very diverse. We had students from all over the world, which was so cool. Um, so Candice, in looking back at your time in particular at Portland State, you know, what are maybe you most proud of and what stands out to you? Like, was there anyone's particular, like without naming names, like a story that was just super inspiring that came out of the program you created or along those lines?
I am, to be honest, I am most proud of people like you. I am proud of all the students. I'll cry. I am so proud of all the students that I have really been blessed to work with. And it's to work with, not, teach or anything else, but, to really, see and be in the midst of all of the potential of the students that I got to work with. And, I'm blessed that people keep in contact with me. Here we are, many, many
We don't
years.
let you go, so yeah.
What's that?
I said we just don't let you go, so yes.
Yeah, and I don't let you go either. I mean, I do keep up with social media in many ways, mostly to keep in touch with my students. So yeah, I have so many stories of all the things that people have gone on and done. Um, you know, but I don't want to talk forever about all these stories, and I can't really make one more important than the other. But I do know a lot of people have gone into helping professions or teaching, having come out of this program. And I would say most have, really, even if they're in more of a corporate setting, their sense of responsibility is around creating environments that support people in that setting.
Cool. Well, I want to personally thank you, Candice, for creating that program. And I mean, look out how it had impacted my life. And I ended up being, it transitioned me into high schools. They were part of your mentor program, took us off the campus into high schools.
And I was going to say, I was so proud of you when you, decided to be an educator.
Yeah.
Because we had discussions about, should I apply for to get into education? It's like,
Yep. And then when I worked in a district nearby, then I had mentors coming from your program. It continued on in our Einstein's universe, right? So yeah, I loved, it bled into the community. It bled, in so many ways. So yeah, so for my audience listening, I'm just going to go over kind of what we've covered, so just looking at that crossroads of the 18 to 25-year-old age, and then the role of educational systems that can help to network. And if any survivors are listening and you are going to go into college, or you are in college, or even if you're an older adult in college, there are so many campus resources there for you, including psychological, which is great and that I benefited from. And then also how colleges and university settings can provide community support. In my work now, I lead women's circles, and women gathering from all different ages, and it's so important. And if you come from an abusive system or cycle, the trend is to isolate. And so you have to kind of unlearn that. And it's so hard to ask for help. It's so hard to let people know you're struggling. And that's something that I wish I had been able to do earlier. I spent a lot of time hiding. And if I could have just said, like, hey, I'm over here, I need help with this sooner, not just a therapist, but with my community. And I'm really hoping to normalize coming out with your status as a survivor. I know, especially in working with teens, that so many young people now go to therapy and have no shame around it, which is amazing, and they shouldn't. And I have a dream that, more and more people who are incest survivors or childhood sexual abuse survivors can just come out and say more openly, like, I'm a survivor, that it doesn't have to be so hush hush, because it's really hard to heal in a closet. It's really hard to feel like you're walking around trying to be like, I can't tell them this, I can't tell them that. And it's just like, if we normalize these aspects of ourselves, then people can get more help, and the world would be so much better. So hopefully that will happen. So
And we see signs.
we
Like
see
you
signs.
said.
Yes, we do. Well, Candice, thank you so much for joining our conversation, and our listeners, thank you so much. So hang on with me, Candice, and I'm gonna just say goodbye to everyone. Thanks again.